I'm okay if you don't win. But I was very upset that you did not get back and start riding. So, and he said that, see, when you are on a race and you fall, you sit on the bike, pedal, and then check if anything is wrong. Don't lose that time also.
Right.
If something is wrong by the time, you will know, and
Yeah.
you will know you have to stop.
Right.
But the way you find out if something is wrong is after you have initiated the pedal stroke.
Yeah.
Life is just like that. I think many times people go through phases wherein they have had hopefully not a crash or an injury, but sometimes some disappointments, and then how they get out of that. Again, it is very satisfying but very challenging. I think we also have to look at not overdoing fitness. We are getting into a phase where many of us are being fit without being healthy. I think it is very important to understand that you don't have to necessarily do 250 kilometers a week to stay healthy. Sometimes it's okay to take a little bit of a slack. We need to understand that, and staying healthy is far more important than staying fit. See, if we see a Rafa Nadal or a Roger Federer and think that they are our role model, they can be our role models for what they have achieved in life as a professional.
I am Baiki Venki, and this is the Working Athlete Podcast. Here, I talk to working athletes from all walks of life and experts from various sports to provide you with inspiration, training tips, time management, and lifestyle advice. If this is something that interests you, please make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any future episodes. Today's guest is a good friend. His name is Gokul Krishna. Gokul is a runner, a cyclist, a coach, and a partner at one of the best bike shops in Hyderabad, the Bike Affair. He is also a podcasting host at the Indian Cycling Podcast. Please make sure you subscribe to that podcast as well. He also hosts a weekly talk show on Leher app by the name It's All About the Bike that currently runs at 8 p.m. every Tuesday. You can check that out as well. In this episode with Gokul, we talk about his weight loss journey and endurance journey as a runner and a cyclist. We also talk about the challenges and the joys of being an entrepreneur, an athlete, a coach, and what helped him keep a balance between all these. Now, let us get into my chat with Gokul. Welcome to the Working Athlete Podcast, Gokul. It's a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.
Gokul, let us start this discussion with talking a little bit about what is work for you now.
I was thinking, one of the reasons I never, when you asked for people to get to you if they are a working athlete, I was thinking I am neither working nor an athlete, so I am not eligible for this. So, anyway, coming to what is work for me, I'm part of the Bike Affair team. So, Bike Affair is a bicycle-related business based out of Hyderabad. We are Hyderabad's one of the earliest bicycle stores dealing with high-end bicycles. We offer basically 4 different kinds of things in addition to the regular sales and service of bicycles, sales service of bicycles, and we do bike fits, which Krish does, and then we organize tours, and we are also into coaching. So I take care of coaching. Krish takes care of bike fit and organizing tours. And recently we opened a new store where we are sitting right now in Gachibowli, which we have done in collaboration with another one of our principals. And this is a store which deals with all the 3 sports of running, swimming, and cycling. Right now, however, we have more products around the running space. So So managing these businesses and the coaching is my work.
Awesome, awesome. So before you uh, became part of Bike Affair team, though, you were in corporate world. You were working,
Yeah.
and then gradually moved into this space.
Yeah.
Right. What kind of um, helped you make that choice, or what drove you towards this space rather than staying in the corporate world?
As a kid, I was always fascinated with wheels. So uh, I think I used to say car before mom. Uh, so I was always fascinated by anything on wheels right from a young age. And I've heard stories of my paternal grandfather, whom I never met. He passed away before my father got married. That uh, he was a completely self-made man, and he had built a business around retail stores in Trivandrum. So I guess listening to these stories, I always wanted to be on my own, and I was always excited about vehicles. So when I was in college, one of my dreams was to build a motorcycle manufacturing facility, build a brand which would make motorcycles.
Yes.
So all those things fell apart when you get a software job.
Yeah.
So, but somehow I was still dabbling with things and stuff, and it was not a very clearly designed move. It just happened. But at the same time, I think subconsciously I always wanted to do this.
Right.
So I always wanted to be on my own, and I uh, I was passionate about vehicles in general.
Right.
So and things just happened. So I think when the opportunity came, the subconscious mind woke up and grabbed that opportunity. So
Okay.
I think it's more to do like
Yeah,
that.
okay.
And of course, like Steve Jobs says, I can relate to this only later on.
Yeah.
I didn't realize all these things when we really started.
Right. Okay. So that is fascinating. I remember one of the emails that I interacted with, or first I got to know you was Go's entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So it is always there
Yeah.
in that subconscious, as you say. Then how and when, what kind of sports did you do as a kid? Or
I did not do any sports. Or rather, I will explain. I was a very fat kid throughout. I was obese, borderline obese. I grew up in Chennai, and we grew up in a kind of an extended family, wherein my cousin brothers were also there, and both of them were definitely more athletic than me, and one was just a year elder to me, the other guy was 4 years elder to me. So I guess because I always try to compare myself with them and I was no good, I just didn't really participate anything seriously. But my other grandfather was a typical Keralite, in the sense that sports was in his blood. So, and he always encouraged us to follow sports, to play sports and all. And we were fortunate to have a big front yard in our home. And so we used to play a lot of things there. When you are just less than 10 years old, that was good enough space to play. We used to just tie across a net and play badminton, or even he was kind of a very different grandfather in that way. He even bought us hockey sticks to play in front of our front yard.
Right.
So I knew all sports.
Yeah.
I have been following tennis from what 7 years, 8 years. But I never played tennis. Obviously, those days we didn't have that many facilities. But other sports, whichever we could, we played. But I was just no good, and I have a very poor hand-eye coordination. So, and I guess because I was both these cousins of mine were much better, so I just gave up too early, I think. So I didn't follow any sports as in I didn't play any sports properly. But if you ask me, I will tell you all the rules of any game. I'll tell you about all the sports personalities, and I was a big fan of Kapil Dev and all those things. Properly following sports, I guess I was an armchair enthusiast right from the beginning.
Right, that's fascinating. When you said always being a fat kid, you were almost as if you were talking about me. So I can totally identify with that aspect. Although I did not have that sport or knowing all sports and all that, I just didn't know anything apart from maybe cricket. But so how and when did that change? Like, what was your kind of highest weight, and when did that
I
change?
I think I might have been just borderline touching 100. I must have gone up to 95, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I must have gone up to 95 when I was probably say 21 years old or so. So,
Okay. So, and then what changed? What?
So the first year of my work, I went home for Diwali. So I got used to being called fat. It was nothing new. So I didn't even bother me too much. But I don't remember who said what. But somebody said something, um, and it hit me hard. But thankfully, the probably that person said it nice. I owe it a lot to him now, him or her. I don't even remember. But I guess the way they said it or whatever, or the way I took it, I decided to do something about it.
Okay.
So I used to work in Wipro at that time, very close to where we are now, the Cyber Task. So we had a gym in the office, and so the day I came back from home and resumed work, I went to the gym. I got onto the treadmill and started running. So I lasted only 45 seconds.
Right.
So I was pretty happy with that. I thought, okay, whatever it is, I made a move. So this was 99. So I was very happy about it. I didn't have any. I didn't get disappointed by that. I was happy that I made a move, and I came the next day again, and I probably slightly improved it, maybe a minute or so, and I hit the treadmill every day for 6 months, close to.
Okay.
I mean, it was not like a 6 months challenge or anything like that.
Right.
But pretty much close to 6 months, I didn't miss a single day. My home where I stayed in Hyderabad was probably around 10 kilometers from work. I remember I used to have my dad's old Bajaj Chetak. I used to drive it down to office every weekend, every Saturday, every Sunday. I used to come just to not to work, to run on the treadmill.
Yeah.
Somehow I just got comfortable with running on the treadmill. I now find it funny why I shouldn't have come all the way. I could have run near my home, but I guess it just triggered a pattern and I stuck to it. So I ran every day, and I lost around 10 plus kgs.
Okay.
And it transformed me. And the key thing about it is those days we didn't have any information. There was no events or anything like that. A 10K would be looked at with eyes popping out, right? So even I don't even remember there was any 10K event, at least that I came across. So and I had very limited knowledge. I didn't buy now we are sitting in a shoe store, but I didn't buy any separate shoes. and 99 Google was not the primary search engine. It was Alta Vista and
Yeah.
Yahoo. So there was no information, nothing. I didn't have a mentor. I had nobody to talk to. So but I guess because I was so unfit, I was so conservative. I did not get injured. And generally now we say that if you're 95 kgs, you should not start running.
Right.
So I didn't have
So you were conservative and it turned out to be good, right? You were not able to go more than 45 seconds or 1 minute initially, and slowly, every day you ran, but only slowly, very gradually you improved it.
and it was not that I was
Consciously doing it, but it was what you could do at that time.
Exactly. It was my limitations proved to be my strength. So and again, I don't know. At 21, you don't have all those kind of thoughts or maturity, So, but I guess I was whatever. I didn't even have any. Even though we were in an office and we used to, even my roommates were my colleagues, some of them at least. But no one else joined me or anything like that. It was just me, and. So I guess, and towards the end, it came to a point wherein when I was on the treadmill, people used to get a sticky note and post it, and they will just write their extension number, stick it on the treadmill and go, because they knew that I will be there for a while. So once I am done, I would call them and tell that the treadmill is free. So it came to that point. It came to a point wherein I had to, from that 45 seconds, I came... towards the end of that 6 months, I stopped because I had to work also.
Yes.
So,
you were able to go like an hour, couple of hours.
I don't think I tried a couple of hours, but more than an hour, and that's you had bosses and managers to please as well. And I'm very thankful to my organization and my team there. They never, nobody mentioned anything. I did not even have a single point or a single instance where they questioned where I was. Of course, I also made sure that my work is not affected, and I was usually there beyond the typical 10 to 6 kind of a time.
Right.
So nobody bothered.
And
it was fine.
Super. So how, so basically that someone saying something kind of triggered that, it's always fascinating, right? As a fat kid myself, there is always that. There is always that bullying. There is always that body shaming. And I think as kids, we are the most mean towards other kids, especially, when it comes to, because I think it's mostly ignorance. At that age, you don't know, but you just say whatever comes to mind. And I experienced that a lot. And that actually continued not just as kids, but also into college and work life. There is always that one or two who shoot their mouth and bully you and fat shame you, and I also had that quite a bit, and there is always that start, stop. When you're motivated, you want to do something, and then you get started, but you only last like a few days in the gym or something. But the great thing about you is that you kept at it. You kept at it. You stuck to it for months and continuously, almost every day. So, and that you saw the results from that. And from there, how did that progress as a athlete?
So actually, running became a very close part of me. So whenever I used to travel and all, one way I used to explore or socialize was through running. So I would always carry my shoes, and I'll ensure that even, for example, if I did have a choice of booking a place where I would stay, there are only two things I would check: whether there is vegetarian food available, because I was a vegetarian, and the second thing is whether there is a place where I could run nearby, or
Right.
if they had a treadmill or a gym.
Yeah.
Because life happened, you go through tight
Yeah, ups and
deadlines,
downs. Yeah.
tight and deadlines, and then I end up overeating and doing lesser stuff. I did go through those phases of gaining.
Multiple cycles of gaining and losing, gaining and losing.
Yeah, but somehow I had that confidence, and thankfully, I think again I was probably around the fattest when we did start the bike affair. About a year,
2008.
2008, 2009. 2009 is when we started, and just before we started, I took a bicycle, and actually I had gone through the phases of buying bicycles multiple times in this working career, but somehow I never got the right bike. Always ended up gifting it to the watchman of the apartment where we live. So I did start riding, and again, before we started Bike Affair, I used to ride a Hercules double suspension bike, the exact bike that we say people not to buy. So I rode that bike to nuts. So I had a 10-kilometer commute. So I rode every day up and down, irrespective of the conditions. But I didn't ride for fun. I rode only for commute. And then eventually we started Bike Affair, and of course then later on I got to ride much better bikes.
Right. So I think the first time I kind of rode with you was around 2010. I think once I was back from the US. I was in Hyderabad. I mean, when I started, I was in Hyderabad, and then in 2009, mid 2009 to 2010, I was in the US for a year.
Correct.
And I came back, and I was riding here, joining our Narsapur rides and all those. I think that was around that time when I rode with you for the first time.
I think so. I remember we did a century to Narsapur when Raman came late on his Act 110.
Right.
He joined at Gandhimaisam or something like that. I was done on that day, I remember. I think I was on a single speed.
Yeah.
I also think that was the first time we rode together.
Right. I remember. I think I still have those pics from thanks to Google photos and stuff. I remember we went to a lake and were Narsapur Lake and were taking pictures around. I sat and quite a scenic route and a lot of monkeys on that route.
Yes.
It is quite fascinating, and I think in those days there were no intervals. There was nothing. We all rode in a destination kind of mode where we have something in mind. Okay, that place, that dam or the Chilkur temple or something, and we made a route out of it and we rode together. And there were these guys from HPC, I think Shay Mandal, and Matt and Sunil, Richard, and all these guys, were the group there. And Raman was also getting into the cycling around that time, and he had that Act 110. It was quite fascinating times, those very memorable times. And how did your cycling from then kind of slowly, how were those initial days into cycling, and how did it progress for you?
Again, I think it took me a transition from a commuter to a kind of an endurance cyclist. So for example, the first two bicycles that we had, I had a Schwinn Cutter, which was a single speed / flip-flop hub.
Flip-flop hub, yeah.
And I think I rode it primarily in the fixie mode initially, and I used to that became my commute bike, ideal commute bike. I also had a Cannondale Quick 5, which was one of the earliest good hybrids that we got in India.
Right.
I think this was before Trek got their FX series in India. So those were my two bikes initially. Then 2011, I think I did the tour of Nilgiris.
Right. I remember that.
So I had a pretty interesting journey around that as well. So I picked up my first road bike, Cannondale CAD 8, CAD 8 or number, I don't remember. And and then I had a crash on that. I bought it probably 2 months before the tour, and I ended up having a bad crash that the frame broke. So then I had to salvage, and it was just 10 days before the tour, and I got an RBR road bike, and then came for the tour. I think that was probably the first time I kind of got used to riding multiple days, long distance and stuff. And as usual, like everybody who does his first multi-day tour, my primary aim was not to be swept on any day. So I just managed to do that.
Yeah. I remember 2011 TFN. That was obviously my first tour as well.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, 2011 was my first tour, and I was riding the Bulldog, the fixed gear bike, and for me that tour was a revelation in a big way. I never we were riding, I knew that it is a challenging tour, because going into the tour, we had heard the stories about it started in 2008, and every year we kept hearing the stories on Bike Zone forum, and people who have done it in those talking about those hills, the Wooty climb, and all those, and it was a big aspirational tour. It still is for many, and trying to being there in the tour, taking part in the tour is a big goal. And then for me, riding that bike itself was again another challenge. I was scared shitless and was riding a hell lot during training for that, and that helped me lose another kind of 10 kgs in those 6 months, and riding like 10,000. And once I got to the tour itself, it was not as difficult as I feared, because I was prepared, because out of that fear and anxiety, I kind of trained well into that. How was it for you as
So it was, though I was not as well prepared as you, but I was preparing, and like I said, I had very modest goals with regards to being, and I think that was there. I don't think the competitive section was there at that time, right?
No, that was the first year they introduced the competitive segment.
Correct.
So 2011 was the first year they introduced the competitive segment.
Yeah, so I was very conservative in the competitive sections as well, and I never really went for it. But I did get my mind up to it only a couple of months before. So I was doing a lot of base miles regularly, generally speaking, but I was not really training for this event in particular.
Right.
So, but it was more of a last minute dash, and but because generally I was in reasonable shape and I had done a lot of miles, every day anyways was a 20-kilometer ride and on a fixie. So it was more from that point of view, but I did have my doubts. The first day was very nervous. I remember the first day we rode on the nice road from Bangalore to Mysore, and that was as usual. Mysore at that time, when you hit it around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, it's very
It's
hot.
very hot, yeah.
So um, the last 30 kilometers, I think we were going through, and the road sections were also bad that year at that time. We went through a phase where there was some construction going on, and there was this gravel with tar, which
Yeah,
was being
yeah.
laid in some sections. So some gravel had spilled over, and one small gravel piece had got somehow magically entangled and kind of braked my rear wheel. So I kind of again had us, thankfully, because we are anyways going slow there. I did fall, but I didn't. Nothing else happened. Nothing to me or the bike. But it was there on the mind. But soon got over it. I think I had already gotten used to falling and getting up and going.
Right.
So the first day was very nervous, and subsequent days were fine. I think I just fell into the rhythm the next day.
Correct, yeah.
I
it's
think the next day probably I tried to spend some time with you guys who were always faster, and then I slowly got into the rhythm. But I still maintained my own uh, within my limits to ensure that I'm able to complete the tour.
Right.
So, but the confidence did slowly grow with each day.
So you're maintaining your own pace and getting through the days without,
Any
getting
incidents.
any incidents or getting into the sweep and was always on our minds. Yeah, excellent. So how did when did kind of you got serious into training for cycling per se? The racing aspect of it.
Yeah. So again, thanks to TFN.
Yeah.
So I did the TFN again in 2015, and that time we had a large contingent coming from Hyderabad. So because of my journey, I was always people would approach me, and knowing that I had gone through this journey of fitness.
Right.
So, and I was always interested in finding out things, and I think I was also closely associated with Raman and Aditya Shetty. These two boys went and approached Maxwell Traverser, and they started some training. Though I did not have the time or the mental strength to join them, but I would join them occasionally. I think I don't remember the exact years, but I think I had interacted with them in some of those trainings, rides, and we used to read Joe Frye's training Bible and stuff like that. And so the 2015, when we registered early, thankfully TFN enabled us to do that, because we had to register in June itself for a December tour.
Right.
So suddenly there were a few people who also came to know that I have registered, and they approached me, and it started off initially like that. Then I had been contemplating doing this, and somehow needed that initial push. So I was in touch with Raman again, because Raman had achieved quite a lot, and he was also studying sports physiology at that time. He was doing his diploma in Germany in sports physiology, and it was just a 1-year diploma, so he was on the verge of completing it, or he was studying. So I approached him, and we thought of doing things together. But somehow it just did not materialize, given the timings and stuff like that, and we also found it very difficult to do things remotely at that point in time.
Yeah.
So given that I couldn't really take more help from Raman, but still the idea was there, and there were people who were doing the tour, so that's when we started. And then I also went through a phase wherein I had a little bit more time, I think, because we had opened a new store at that time. And also one of the store was just below a functional fitness studio. And in fact, we went to that store because of the the chief trainer there. He is a cyclist from Australia, and the first day he landed here to kind of set up that space and train the trainers. He was the chief trainer for the country, and so the very first weekend, like typical cyclist, he just came to the cycle store and we got introduced, and he was a fantastic human being. And so I got assurance from him also that he'll help me with the strength training. So we started a small group, and some 5-6 people, and then we trained together. And of course, the first couple of guys were looking to do the tour, but not everybody. And then it started off like that. And we did the 2015 tour, and then things moved on, and I always had. And because I always had been running far before that, I had started cycling. I was also very, by that time, my general understanding of running dynamics and all had changed. And people say, when you're looking to observe body language, you observe people, right?
Right.
So I observe people, how they walk,
Right.
so or how they run. So that was very exciting for me to see how somebody runs and what is their posture and stuff like that. So I used to help people around the running form as well. And I think it just continued from that.
Right.
And the further push came when I had a serious crash in 2019 where I broke my collarbone, my first collarbone. So I had a lot of time to kill. So at that time, I went ahead and kind of completed my certification for coaching. So that time helped me in
From
doing.
where is this certification?
I did it in from UK, Association of British Cycling Coaches.
Right.
So of course this is more of an online thing with some contact sessions and tests, but it was a very well designed course, and there were lesser things which we learned completely new, but the way it is structured, it gives you confidence, and
Right.
that minor 5-10% that you might have missed,
Yeah.
but it gives you the reassurance that you are in the right track.
Yeah.
So, and then after that, you get more confidence.
Right. So that for contact session, you had to travel there, or how did that
No,
happen?
there was no contact sessions for the studying part. There was only contact sessions for the testing part. So we had 2 tests. One test was for testing your communication and leadership skills, wherein you have to present a topic, ideally to a bunch of coaches as well as the public audience.
Right.
But because it was not in UK, we did it here, and I sent a recording.
Okay.
And the second one was more of an assignment, wherein you actually do an annual training plan for an athlete.
Right.
They could ask you questions and follow up things and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, but you have to prepare a document which is as self-sufficient as possible, such that they don't have to talk to you for clarifications.
Right.
But there might be interactions. I'm not sure whether there was interactions, but there could be. So a senior coach would review that.
Right. Now, I think for me, it is fascinating, right? How people kind of we gravitate towards something that fits our thinking, or the kind of personality we have. I always see you as someone who is hungry for knowledge, hungry for learning new things, and also a very approachable and people person who likes to share. So I think that those are the two kind of required ingredients for someone who is in coaching, I would think. Right. You got to always keep learning, because there is no one thing that, and it doesn't stay static. You got to keep learning, and unless you, and also sharing that and teaching that is also a part of the learning process itself.
Correct.
And that becomes I think some people are just some personalities are more suited for that. I think you are one of them, and I'm sure many people have over the years, I think, benefited from that.
I hope to think so.
Yeah. So, what about the coaching aspect of it is most satisfying for you?
See, if you can change a person's life,
Hmm.
there is nothing better than that.
Right.
So through coaching, you can do that.
Hmm.
Uh, it need not be just. Finally, we are influencing any person's life. It is not just that they become fitter or faster or whatever. So I think that is the most satisfying thing, no? When you enable somebody to meet their goals, if you succeed in that, you end up having a transformed person.
Right.
So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think if we even positively influence a few people in our lives, that is enough.
Yeah. That is, yeah, that I have to completely agree. That is very satisfying to see, a positive impact immediately, and you can also have that feedback from them as well, right? So that is really good. And what are the challenges you see in this?
Um, what are the challenges? I, I think understanding different people. For example, two of my first athletes, I think
Yeah.
one of them is coaching with you, Anirudh. So Anirudh and Prajwal were two of my youngest and earliest athletes. One will not talk, the other will not stop talking. so so and I'm coaching both of them. Both of them are the same age and absolutely contrasting characters. So in fact, it took me a long time. I think after coaching Prajwal for so long, recently I read a book and I was able to relate uh, uh, to Prajwal a bit more. I wish I had read that book earlier.
Right.
So, in fact, the book is called The Idiots Around Me. And it's about the whole point is it's not that the other person is idiot. It's just that because we are not able to understand them, we think they are.
Really think, yeah.
So and they basically classify people into four broad personality types. So uh, whenever I was reading about yellow, I was like Prajwal's image comes up in my mind. So I the biggest challenge is often that, and each person is different. So, the other challenge that does come is. I mean, you asked for the biggest challenge, but probably if I add a few more,
Sure.
Sometimes it's about setting a goal also, because uh, whatever we say, if somebody is not able to orchestrate and determine their goal, especially in a fitness realm of the world, I think this last 2 years has changed a lot of things.
Yeah.
But before that, we were all we are not comfortable in setting a goal. It was like, no, we are doing too much types, right? So but getting beyond that and trying to set something which is reasonable, which is measurable and stuff, that is that. At times, even now, I struggle with making people get to that point. Not all, but some. Yeah. And the third is, I think, I wouldn't say challenging. Again, probably one more satisfying thing is helping people get up.
Yeah.
When I say get up, it is both figuratively and at a bigger scale as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
I remember one of the earliest races that someone else participated, and the post the race, the coach and the athlete were very pissed, and I was observer.
Yeah.
So, and this continued for a few days, and we are all traveling back together. And then finally the ice had to break sometime. And then, so when one of them opened up, then the coach said something which was startling and which has stuck with me till now. That he said that there was a crash, and the athlete did not get up and restart the race.
Restart. Yeah.
He was saying, I'm okay if you don't win. But I was very upset that you did not get back and start riding. So, and he said that, see, when you are on a race and you fall, you sit on the bike, pedal, and then check if anything is wrong.
Yeah.
Don't lose that time also.
Right.
If something is wrong, by the time you will know, and you will know you have to stop.
Right.
But the way you find out if something is wrong is after you have initiated the pedal stroke.
Yeah.
So life is just like that. I think many times people go through phases wherein they have had hopefully not a crash or an injury, but sometimes some disappointments, and then how they get out of that. Again, it is very satisfying but very challenging.
Right.
Yeah, because you move into the mental realm from the physical, and physical is far easier than the mental aspects.
Yeah. This is fascinating, right? I completely agree with those things. It is sometimes, in a normal world, some people will have just the events in mind that they want to take part in, and then go about. What would you do when there are no events? Right? So, and in a situation, it becomes the thing that you mentioned about helping them identify a goal for themselves that is beyond those events is becomes that much more important, right? So, and there is also the aspect of not just the physical fitness, the mental aspects of it, the attitude towards how you approach incident that is out of the ordinary, not something that you expect. So you don't expect to crash, of course, but what do you do once you do? Right? All those things, the attitude aspect of it and all that. It is, I think, it is a learning for us as well as them, and in trying to understand all these different people and different situations and trying to address those, like you said, the idiots around us or something. There are so many avenues, different ways that we can learn, and it is a big learning process that is ongoing and ever growing, and that is something that is very satisfying for me as well. Excellent. And I don't want to it's been fantastic interaction, and I don't want to end this session without talking about something crazy that you have done last year, right? The Everesting part of it, and you did Everesting and did not stop there. You completed 10,000 meters of elevation in that ride. How did you, what made you think of that, and what got you into it, and
in fact, it's just a continuation of what you said. That is one of the things, because this happened in October 2020. But I was in reasonable shape for the Todi Bintan, which was supposed to be in March.
Well, we were supposed to go there.
We still haven't got our money back. So generally there was a sense of lack of direction, and that was there. And you end up reading a lot of things. I mean, reading because you had more time, sitting at home and stuff like that. So I had thought about this. I had read about Everesting, and so I thought, why not, do it? And yeah, I kind of sample tested it by telling it to my family initially. So because those days we had time to walk and stuff like that. We are at home. We are going for a walk around our campus,
Right.
and obviously I didn't tell the full details, but so they are like, okay, go ahead, do what is there. So then, but they were completely positive. They did not have any negative thoughts. Then I mulled over it for a day or so. Then I thought that if I have to do this, I still had huge reservations. I was not completely confident that I'll be able to do it. So then I thought that if it is worth doing, we should do it for a purpose. Uh, uh, One was the bigger purpose will motivate me, and the second thing was also I felt that I could um, run off the energy that I would get from a purpose like that, from the team that I will build. I had understood that it needs a crew, and the crew plays a very crucial part and stuff. So from that point of view, then I approached Pasha, who was part of the Maxwell River Cycling Welfare Association, and um, told him this, and said that I would like to do this with as a charity event to raise funds for the association, the kids in the cycling association. So I think even he did not know what was Everesting when I spoke to him, but he said he because again they are all in that athlete mode. They are in that positive energy. They were staying in the same building as Maxwell sir, so they don't know to say no. So they said, yes, we'll do it. Let's go ahead. And then I said, discuss with sir and ask his permission whether he'll be okay with that. So he discussed with sir. He did some research, understood what it was, and then told him. And then and explained to him what it was. And then he said, of course, why not? Let's support him. Let's go ahead and give him all the best. So that's how it started off. And then again, I think I gave myself about a couple of months, though I had a lot of base miles, but I gave a couple of months to prepare and train. The confidence grew, but it was definitely a challenge. And one more thing that really motivated me was at that time there was a few people who had done Everesting, but nobody had in the Everesting realm. There are also again now a lot of classifications possible. There is half Everesting, full Everesting, and so on. So half Everesting is basically you pick up a hill and go up and down the hill till you get an elevation gain of half of Mount Everest. So there is half full Everesting, and then there is 10,000 meters. There was nobody in India at that point in time who had done 10,000 meters. From the very beginning, I wanted to go for 10,000 meters because I thought I will never be the first in India in anything. So at least this I should see if I can be the first Indian to do. So that was again a big motivation. And that helped me. I think I did train myself a lot with regards to climbing and stuff. I was also fortunate to have a great support team in the association, and Pasha was my crew head, and he took care of all those things which needed.
Crew plays a big part in such
because and he also did not sleep for the 27 hours or so. So and also I knew that my weakness is my nutrition. So I took help from a very good friend who is a certified nutritionist and who is also an athlete, who is also a fantastic coach now, is a running coach, Gautam Potineni. So that made a huge difference. So I think the support and the crew, and it was not just the crew, because this was in October 2020 when there was no vaccination. The There was very limited opening up of the lockdown effects. So, and there was no cycling event. I felt because it was for a purpose also, I was very happy to see actually a lot of runners just came, cyclists came to support us support during that event. No, there are throughout the night there were people even coming at 3 o'clock, 3 a.m. and 12 midnight and stuff like that. No, I think totally over a period of and we had also requested people to come over a period of time so that from a COVID perspective, we could ensure that nobody gets sick and stuff like that. So it was it galvanized the whole cycling community. So that was again, I think, a much bigger thing than just some idiot climbing 10K. So
no, that is completely agree. The charge, the kind of charge everyone around gets from a monumental task, like that, is amazing. I was involved in Everesting when DP was doing it. I was crewing him, and throughout the day, like you said, there were people coming in, climbing along 1, 2, 3. I think some of the people climbed like 7, 10 repeats, never done more than 2, right?
Okay.
So it kind of changed, and throughout, and riding in the night on the hill is like another thing. I think I heard both the podcast episodes that you guys did on the Everesting, and I will provide the links for that in the show notes, because we'll not be able to cover everything there. It goes into the training details and also the kind of nutrition planning and the crewing and everything. It was a fantastic feat. Chitty and you both did. Kudos, man. That was a fantastic.
I think what Chitty did was far bigger than what I did, because he generally is a far better rider than me.
Yeah.
But at that particular point in time, he
wasn't riding.
He wasn't riding much, and he was not in peak fitness. So yeah, so he rode on strength, mental strength. So completely on mental strength.
Yeah. Fantastic, Gokul. It's been fantastic chat with you. To conclude this session, what are some of the tips you would give working athletes to do well at work and sport?
I think prioritize. And I mean, so when you're doing multiple things, you have to prioritize. And what I see now that is going to evolve, and in fact that seems to be a study which I am gaining a lot of interest, and I see a lot of impact on this particular aspect, is I think we also have to look at not overdoing fitness. We are getting into a phase where many of us are being fit without being healthy. I think it is very important to understand that you don't have to necessarily do 250 kilometers a week to stay healthy. Sometimes it's okay to take a little bit of a slack. So we need to understand that, and staying healthy is far more important than staying fit. See, if we see a Rafa Nadal or a Roger Federer and think that they are our role model, they can be our role models for what they have achieved in life as a professional, right? Not in terms of what they are with regards to the health. Because probably considering that they abuse their body so much for their professional needs, somebody who is so elegant as Roger Federer still has so many surgeries and
so many injuries.
So many injuries, and he actually has had the least amount of injuries, right? Most sports professionals across the world admire him for the longevity that he has had, and that is because of the elegance with which he plays. And even he has so many surgeries and injuries and so on.
Right.
And Nadal too is in the other strand, he is brute force. So even they say that. I think the Nadal has mentioned this somewhere. If you want to look at health, don't look at this. So again, I'm digressing a bit, but the important thing I would like to say is understand that don't be fit at the cost of being healthy. Prioritize your things. Be fit, be healthy, and balance. Don't compromise on your sleep. I think that is the first thing that gets deprioritized. So let's not do that. I know I do that very often. I suffer because of that, but I think that is the truth. We need to take it a little bit easy with regards to the training that we do. Also, we probably end up doing a little too much. We should get smarter and do lesser.
This is fantastic advice. Both that we need to prioritize. We need to prioritize health, not just fitness. Right. Great. Gokul, thank you. It's been fantastic chatting with you. Thanks again for taking the time out and sharing your journey.
Thank you, Venki. I really admire your endurance in doing week to week. I know how difficult it is. So it's a big hats off to you. I think you're doing a fantastic job in getting the stories across to business.
That was my conversation with Gokul. Hope you liked it. If you are enjoying these podcasts, you can support the podcast by subscribing to the YouTube channel. The channel is Bikey Venky on YouTube. That is Bikey, Bikey Venky. It really helps me keep doing these podcasts. Of course, please subscribe to the Working Athlete podcast on your favorite podcasting app, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, etc. See you next week with another guest. And thank you for your support.